The cold, hard American truth is that yes, getting rich will indeed make your life a whole lot easier, but there's a two-edged sword quality to that ease that you have to watch out for. We've seen increasingly more open online discourse about people telling other people, just date for the money. It doesn't matter if you like the person that you're with. Secure higher riches, secure higher status, you'll be good. Now, you might for yourself decide that being financially independent is really important to you and your children. Maybe this is something that wasn't typical for your community or where you grew up in. For you, character counts, what kind of person you are matters, and you've worked really hard to put your children and yourself in a very specific position. You are not out of danger. And one of the things that I loved about the show We Were Liars, which is right now number 7 on Amazon Prime's video streaming platform, is that we have this character in the form of Ed. Ed does not care that Carrie, his longtime partner, is part of this wealthy Sinclair family. Her access to funds, her significantly higher social status, it's not why he's dating her. Ed, of all people, is the most self-aware person to potentially see through the potent myth-making that elite families like the Sinclairs engage in. Ed wasn't chasing all this drama down. He's a kind, intelligent, decent man who happens to love Carrie Sinclair. She's a divorcee who had a significant trust fund, who is also heir to this massive publishing fortune. Ed, obviously, unlike the rest of the Sinclairs, is an Indian gentleman. For the purposes of the drama in this show, that specific ethnicity detail, it doesn't really matter. You won't hear slurs against his specific ethnicity. You're not going to hear comments about what kind of food he eats. In this iteration of author E. Lockhart's tale, there's nothing that the Sinclair family does in terms of attacking him for his Indian culture, which is of course varied and not monolithic, but you don't see this very white American family say anything about that. But we're not out of the clear. What matters to Harris Sinclair, the patriarch of this vast fortune, the guy who's going to determine who gets what, is that Ed and his nephew Gat, they're just not white people. They're not blonde, they're not light skinned, and they don't match with the Sinclair lineage. Does this matter to Carrie or the other Sinclairs? No, we never hear anything about that. And we never find out what Tipper thinks about it. We just know that she's been with this guy long enough and probably has never challenged him. However, as the season unfolds, we listen to Harris talk about an Asian buyer who he purchased some art from and the words he uses to describe that buyer and this entire group of Asian people who he doesn't delineate or articulate. And no one except the first heir to the fortune, Cadence herself, says anything to him. But this, it's a minor drama compared to the much larger one E. Lockhart is trying to illustrate here. The author herself was a scholarship kid who broke into this elite and glittering world for her own education. She did feel that her sense of welcome was somewhat conditional. What does it mean to find out that after all this hard work, you're actually still not considered good enough? Is there a kind of humiliation that has to be endured in order to get the education you deserve or to go after the thing you love and want to do? To be allowed or permitted to a place is not welcome. Or you might find that your welcome, like Ed's welcome, is predicated on this kind of self-centeredness, where you existing there provides a nice cultured story to these people, a diverse tale that they can brag about in an admissions letter later. You exist to enlighten or spice things up. Your humanity and friendship gets shrunk down to a story that proves their worldliness. And even worse, your presence might alleviate a deep-seated fear that deep down, this group of people is racist. You being there provides a kind of fire insurance for them. Pleasant and nice, good manners, they don't necessarily equate to welcome or acceptance. What it could be is that these people have just done a far better job at calculating your usefulness to them than you have yourself. Ed, to his credit, is pretty aware that he's walking on a landmine here. He's caught the vibe that Harris is hard to please, he's brown, and his money doesn't come or touch this kind of wealth. And Ed, particularly, is not interested in trying to get what he can get out of Harris. He doesn't want the free ride that Carrie's connection could provide for him because he has already realized there are conditions attached to that. This is not freedom. He suspects that Harris uses the trust funds and the power to maintain a kind of control over his daughters. In this way, he can perpetually infantilize them. Having someone bankroll so many aspects of your life, it can be fun, but it does have a cost, and it comes with a responsibility to the person who is bankrolling that. You're essentially at the goodwill of Harris with money. There's a massive discrepancy here because Harris holds Ed to a very different standard than he does his own 3 daughters. For all Harris's giant book of rules about what a Sinclair is and what a Sinclair does, he doesn't seem to have taken any actual time to enforce or cultivate this behavior or character in his children. All his disappointment is palpable through all of these scenes. He just doesn't parent. He does manipulate, though. He might have been a good provider, but he has no actual idea how to raise people to embody a sense of character he doesn't have himself. And that disappointment, it extends to his grandchildren as well. They are in many ways a reminder to him of this up and coming generation of expensively educated young adults that are also adrift. Now, here's where the sneaky thing gets by. There are people that they want to be perceived a certain way, like Harris and the Sinclair family. But what they'll do is that they will do or insinuate the very thing they mean to, but they will do it in such a way that it can be perceived as a completely different matter or something else. So for example, you have Harris, who seems to be wanting Ed to prove that he, will be a good member of this family, is constantly giving him these tasks to do. And Ed is trying to impress or at least just do the man a favor. All of that can be perceived as son-in-law, future father-in-law things, right? But as Harris's racism is revealed, what we realize is he just is trying to make this brown man useful for something around here. He has no intention of ever welcoming him into this family. Ed has been dating Carrie for over 9 years. So that period of trying to please and present yourself to a future father-in-law, it's not necessary. They have worked together to create an independent wealth separate of the Sinclair family. At one point, they even considered a baby. Ed has taken in Carrie's children from another marriage as his own and loved them. He even put off his dream to have a child with Carrie so he could afford to save up money so that that child could go to the same schools that were approved of by the Sinclair family. Ed might be allowed to eat at the Sinclair table, but he was clearly not done proving himself, according to Harris. You'd think Harris would think about the fact that Carrie's ex was a white abusive person who was a loser. You'd think it would count for something that Ed was the one who stood by her side through her sobriety. Now, there are significant spoilers ahead, so if you want, save this video, come back for later. You've been warned. Lockhart's reveal here is that for all this Sinclair mythology and our morals, this is who we are, this is how we've built our wealth, there's some petty jealousies and there's harboring of biases here. Later all but admits that, Ed and any grandchildren he would give them would not be the ideal type of Sinclair. Harris doesn't even initially want to give a family heirloom ring to Ed to propose to his own daughter. And suddenly, curiously, he gives permission and the ring. We are meant to believe this is him coming around and that love has conquered all. But mysteriously and with great agony, Carrie rejects Ed's proposal. After all this time, after she said she wanted it. Harris is more devious than we thought. He'd struck a deal with Carrie because guess what? Carrie is hiding something for Johnny. Johnny, who has anger issues, took a prank way too far with a rival boarding school and ended up taking that out on an innocent child who caught him. The cover-up of that violence and those legal fees, that was hefty. Paying off people and paying off a lot of witnesses, never going to be cheap. Guess what? That would have put a dent in Ed's nest egg. After all this talk about Carrie and Ed together becoming financially independent from this family, Carrie crawls back to her dad and begs him to help. And guess what? Harris agrees, but under this vague condition, she's not to get married. Carrie, believing that her loyalty is to her son and wanting to protect him from the consequences of his own actions, agrees to this. And guess what? Ed is none the wiser. But it's Ed who has loved her, who's stayed by her, who's supported her, who is left jilted at this proposal. And with no explanation. He is the one who is betrayed. Carrie's boho vibe and open-minded ways, at the end of the day, she's no different than the other Sinclairs. The Sinclair family is far more concerned with the appearance of morality and goodness than the actual pursuit of it. Harris and the adult Sinclair women, they know there's a social benefit to being perceived as good, but they don't truly search for that goodness on a spiritual level. They think all of this makes them untouchable and strong, but the longer we hang around Beechwood, the more hollow and brittle they seem. Since the British Empire first sent people over to the Americas to colonize it, there was this concept of waste people. It's where we get the idea of white trash from. The English were really good at moralizing the poverty that was inherent in their class system. The upper classes were not blessed by the compounding fortune of land ownership, but by God himself. Also, some alleged good breeding and character. Howard Zinn shows how, contrary to popular opinion, this idea was actually brought to America. And our culture's smugness with thinking that caste and class is not a thing that we deal with obscures us from the reality of how that thinking has still shaped us today. The British people were okay with waste people as long as they were sent over somewhere where you could get some profit for the empire out of them. The Sinclairs are not inherently more defective morally than other people. They just have the ability to take shortcuts. Like many other Americans, Harris is able to thinly veil his true feelings, his racist feelings about these Indian men running around his island by just thinking and saying that it would be preposterous to call him racist. And it's not about true badness or character, because you would think then he wouldn't support his own children and his grandchildren with all of their lies. Lies that cover up their continuous moral failings. Harris most likely just sees Ed as someone who is entertaining Carrie and is just a season he plans to ride out. This is not an example of the diversification of power and wealth then on Beechwood Island. It is just an example of his expanded tolerance to go through a situation that he doesn't find super pleasant. So Ed too is a liar.